This fairly short video, produced in 2020, will focus on what I believe are the three most significant developments in the world at the moment, apart from the global climate crisis, which was covered in the first video in this series. These other developments may, at first glance, appear to have little or no connection with the climate crisis. However, in the third and final video, I will make connections in an attempt to paint a clearer picture about where things are going for us as humans on a dying planet. I will attempt to show you how these are the precise developments that we all need to be watching very closely over the next few years. The three areas of development that I will examine in this video are economics, technology, and politics. Economics. The most significant development in world economics at this point in history is almost certainly our move to a cashless society. There have been many changes in the history of economics which were significant. They include the introduction of coins as an alternative to bartering, a move to paper currency, the use of checks, and then the advent of credit cards. It would be easy to see the switch to totally electronic money as just one more step in this overall evolution of money. Certainly, each step has made it easier and faster to carry out transactions, thus enabling the world to move into more sophisticated ways of doing business. But this is the first time since the invention of currency that people have been pushed to turn loose of currency as a fallback option. And the goal is to eliminate that option altogether, totally and globally. I believe that this difference is frighteningly significant. What is happening with the move toward a cashless society has been compared to the shift from bicycles to automobiles. Having two options was a great advancement at the time. But if bicycles had been outlawed in order to encourage more people to use cars, that would not have been genuine progress, and people would have been entitled to ask suspicious questions about why anyone thought it was necessary to do away with bicycles just because cars are better for some things. Influences from many different directions at all levels of business are now actively forcing people to let go of cash, every last cent of it. Recently, my daughter tried to put cash on her library card so that she could get a couple of photocopies at the local library. She was told that cash was no longer accepted, apart from very old people who find it hard to make the transition to electronic money. So my wife, who is in her 70s, went in with her library card to see what would happen. She was half the morning waiting for a supervisor to come and approve such an exceptional favor. It appeared to be a deliberate, though unnecessary, campaign to stop even an older person from using even a few cents of cash. This is just one of hundreds of ploys being used to lever people away from using cash. The more you examine what is happening, the more clear it becomes that forces behind the banking industry are covering literally every base in their efforts to make a world where cash will not be used for anything. Not for a local paper at the corner shop, not as a donation to a homeless beggar, not as a cab fare, nor as a tip, nor even as an offering in the collection plate at your local church or synagogue. When the last dollar has been burnt and the last coin has been melted down, then what? That is when we will discover why it was absolutely essential that all cash be removed first. Mark my words, this worldwide campaign is not so much about controlling international crime, nor is it about tracking down tax dodgers, as it is about something far more sinister. I won't say more now, but I would encourage you to watch the third video in this series to get the full picture. Technology. Now I will move on to a technological development that will have far-reaching implications for everyone on this planet in the next few years. In a very short space of time, the world has been transformed through the proliferation of computers, iPads and smartphones, and through internet technology in general. We now have almost instant global access to almost anyone and almost anything. The answers to any question you could imagine are already out there, just waiting to be Google searched. In among all that data is an almost infinite amount of information on you and me, and about almost everyone else on the planet. What we read, what we buy, where we go, where we live, our health records, our spending patterns, everything. Most of us have come to accept all that as being fairly benign, maybe even helpful. It brings us a lot of relevant information, much of it in the form of advertising and almost all of it unsolicited. Nevertheless, it is, on the whole, information which we find to be interesting and often quite useful. Beyond that, however, most of what is known about people all over the world is just trivial information collecting cosmic dust in cyberspace. The entire population of the world working together would never be able to process all of that information. But all of that is changing with the advent of something called quantum computers. Such computers are, for now, extremely rare, little more than a dream. But with such a computer, you could access almost instantly all of the information you need to maintain and instantly act upon detailed files for every person on the planet. Add to quantum computers the concept of artificial intelligence, and you could have a system set in place which would run itself. A quantum computer could be programmed to analyze all of that information and make very important life-changing decisions with regard to every one of us. Decisions which we could not reverse, nor against which we could ever appeal. There is abundant evidence to suggest that the decisions will mostly be helpful, bringing much greater efficiency to everything from healthcare to law enforcement. So, from these first 2 points, it can be seen that we are, at this very moment, moving into a cashless society where, through the use of quantum computers and artificial intelligence, everything that we do, say, or perhaps even think could be subject to minute interpretation and perhaps forceful manipulation. That is where we are at, both economically and technologically as a species. Politics. But now I want to look at what is most significant about the year 2020 and how that relates to global political developments. In a word, what is most significant is China. We in the West tend to be fixated with ourselves and what our various leaders are doing or saying. In the meantime, the most populous country in the world has, for centuries, kept to itself, a sleeping dragon, as others have put it. But in recent years, China has awakened and begun to flex its muscles economically, technologically, and politically. China is becoming a huge force to be reckoned with all around the globe. China and economics. China has now become the largest economy in the world, outpacing both the United States and the European Union. It has done this partially by using the dollars it gets through exports to purchase US Treasury bonds. China now owns 1/5 of all US foreign debt. That is 3 times more than any other country in the world, except Japan. China has, right now, the ability to destabilize the American economy, causing US interest rates to rise steeply. They could do it just by calling in its American debt, cashing in more than $1 trillion worth of treasury bonds. This would cause the US dollar to collapse. This year, 2020, marks a decision by China to float its own currency, the yuan. By doing this, China would no longer be dependent on the American economy to support its own economy, and China would be far less affected itself if the US economy were to collapse. Just something to think about. China and technology. Technologically, China is also hoping to make huge changes this year, in the year 2020. In particular, China hopes to achieve world supremacy in the production of quantum computers. This follows an announcement late in 2019 that Google had developed a computer, nicknamed Sycamore, that was able to do a calculation in just over 3 minutes, which would have taken the world's previous fastest supercomputer, IBM's Summit computer, 10,000 years to perform. Just one computer with the capacity that Sycamore has would be able to virtually control the world. One day after Google's announcement, China announced that it had developed a light-based computer simulation which would be 10 billion times faster than any supercomputer previously in existence. China's chief scientist on the project, Guo, compared quantum supremacy to the difference between cold weapons and firearms. A rather chilling comparison in a world where some governments show little hesitance about using whatever military advantages they think they have. Certainly, computers like Sycamore, or whatever it is that China has, could be used to control virtually everything on Earth, including all military movements and developments. China and politics. But the most disturbing thing about China at this point in history is that country's approach to politics, particularly with regard to human rights. Even with its own people, the Chinese Communist Party has established a regime which can arbitrarily and unaccountably torture, kill, and even sell the organs from anyone that the government considers to be a political threat. It has been widely documented and widely accepted by many governments around the world now that tens of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners in China are killed each year for their organs, which are sold to transplant tourists from the West. These tourists pay big money to get a liver, heart, lung, or kidney more or less on demand a few days after they arrive. China maintains extensive files on the millions of political prisoners she now holds in so-called re-education centers, and government officials are able to locate the best match in almost no time, thus guaranteeing tourists a quick turnaround if they come with enough cash to pay for the murder that is necessary in order to get them what they want. Worse still, those people from whom the government extracts organs are paralyzed but not anesthetized during the removal of their organs, causing an excruciating death for these hapless victims. This is just further evidence of the government's institutionalized cruelty towards anyone who dares to criticize the ruling party. The backdrop to all of this includes millions of closed-circuit TV cameras, as well as supercomputers, which are all used to monitor the behavior of more than 1 billion Chinese citizens. An artificial intelligence program picks up on the slightest deviations from the norm as a way of locating and punishing anyone who dares to step out of line. Such innocuous things as whether a person enters the house more often through the back door than through the front door, or whether a person buys more than the average amount of alcoholic beverages, all go into the computer to affect their social credit rating. Re-education camps have been set up for literally millions of people all over the country who are seen as social failures in need of re-education. In these camps, people are drilled on such things as the proper way to open a door or to sit in a chair, and anyone who does it wrong is jabbed with a cattle prod until they get it right. All of this is aimed at creating a population of totally obedient, unquestioning slaves, afraid to do even the slightest thing differently to what their masters decree. But of far more importance is China's rapid expansion into other countries, where they're training dictators and training would-be dictators, all in how to implement similar controls over their own local populations. In very small countries, such as some Pacific Island states, it's as easy as offering the leader of those countries millions of dollars in bribes to make Chinese ideology the official ideology of the island. But in bigger countries like Kenya, the Philippines, or Venezuela, the partnership is far more complex and far more sinister, as local leaders are tutored on how to control their populations. At this stage, China does not have the firepower to destroy America, but neither does America have the will to take on the biggest country in the world, especially if China's neighbor, Russia, chooses to back her up militarily. So how is it all going to end? And does climate change have anything to do with it? In the third and final video in this series, I will examine all of these developments, both in relation to climate change and in relation to Bible prophecy, to create a frightening yet hopeful scenario with regard to where this is all leading. Please do watch that video.